We're good.
Okay. Hi, my name is Zerai Gonzalez,
I'm Mariela Ramirez.
Hi, I'm Shandy Ernest.
Hi, I'm Daniela Perez.
and today we're going to be talking about cancer and the lifestyle. More specifically, we're going to discuss how certain lifestyle choices that we make on a day-to-day basis can put us at risk of having cancer. These lifestyle choices can range from diet, stress, smoking, and obesity. Not many of us are aware that our day-to-day choices can increase our chances of getting cancer. From the way we eat to the amount of times we neglect working out, these choices can put us in a position in which we are at risk of getting cancer. Although there is no direct link between foods and cancer, some studies have demonstrated heavy consumption of red and preserved meats, salt, preserved foods, and salt can increase the risk of not only having stomach cancer, but also other cancers such as colorectal cancer. And another great factor is obesity, which has actually been proven to be around 40% of the United States of America citizens that are obese. And so according to the National Cancer Institute, certain fat tissue produces excess amounts of estrogen, which is known to cause cancer. And there's also factors such as having extremely high blood levels of insulin and chronic inflammation can promote tumor growth and a high chance of having cancer. Overall, medical physicians do suggest that their patients follow a plant-based food diet that are rich in fruits and vegetables, as well as to stay clear from any processed foods, alcohol, and sugary drinks, as well as heavily fried foods. So, the importance of cancer in the lifestyle. So, we put a lot of emphasis as to why our lifestyle choices can give us cancer because studies have demonstrated how around 95% of our cancer cases are caused by life choices and other environmental factors as well. Only 5% of cancer is linked by genetics. And so, in the graph below, it shows the relationship between in between the different type of cancers, more specifically in the environment and lifestyle versus genetics. And so as we can see here, 90 to 95% of cancer is from environmental choices and lifestyle choices that we are not aware that we're either over consuming or that we are using incorrectly. And so only 5 to 10% of it is from genetics. And so this graph does a great job in breaking down how different lifestyle choices such as smoking and diet and over consuming alcohol, as well as obesity and infections, can be a can put us at high risk of having cancers, and how they are huge contributors that the average American is consuming daily.
Okay, so obesity is something that a lot of people usually connect only to body weight, but it actually has effect throughout the whole body. It is not just about how a person looks or how much they weigh. Excess body fat can change the body's normal balance, and those changes can raise the risk of developing cancer. One of the biggest reasons for that is chronic inflammation. Normally, inflammation is supposed to help the body. It is part of the body's response to injury or infection. But with obesity, the body can stay in a low level inflammatory state for a long time. Instead of helping, that constant inflammation can start causing damage, which over time it can create conditions that make it easier for cancer to form and to grow. Another thing that happens is hormonal imbalance. So the fat tissue is actually active in the body, which means it can release hormones and other chemical signals. When there's too much fat tissue, those signals can become abnormal, and that matters because hormones help control how cells grow and behave. If those signals are off for too long, cells may start dividing more than they should, and that can increase the risk of tumor growth. Obesity is also linked to insulin resistance. So that means the body does not respond to insulin as well as it should. So insulin levels can be super high. And that is important because insulin is not only related to blood sugar, it can also encourage cell growth. So when insulin stays elevated over time, it can create another condition that may help cancer cells survive and to keep multiplying. Um, Something else that's important is cell communication. So in a healthy body, cells are constantly being told when to grow and when to stop growing and when to die if they're damaged. But with obesity, the communication can become disrupted and cells may not respond normally anymore, and abnormal cells may survive when they really shouldn't. And that is one of the ways the risk of cancer increases. What I think is the most important thing is that it shows obesity is much more serious than just weight issues. It affects many systems in the body at the same time. It affects inflammation, hormone levels, insulin signaling, and cell communication, as I said. When all those things are being disrupted together, the body becomes more vulnerable to diseases like cancer, especially. The research that I put on this slide supports the idea by explaining that obesity is associated with chronic low-grade inflammation, which can promote carcinogenesis or cancer development. Another study also connects obesity-related inflammation and insulin resistance to cancer progression. So when you put all of it together, the message is clear that obesity can create an internal environment that supports cancer. So the main point is that obesity should not be seen as only an issue of body weight. It is a biological condition that can change how the body works and increase cancer risk in several different ways. These graphs just help show the relationship between obesity and cancer risk in research data. So the graphs compare people with obesity to people with normal weight, and they look at both men and women. They also separate potential obesity-related cancers from established obesity-related cancers. The biggest overall pattern is that risk goes up with age in both groups, but in many cases, the risk is higher in the obesity group. So even before looking at each graph closely, that is the main takeaway as age increases, cancer risk increases, and obesity seems to make the risk even greater. In the graph for potential obesity-related cancer in men, the two lines are pretty close to each other, but the obesity group is still a little higher. That may seem like a small difference, but it still suggests that obesity is linked to increased risk over time. The same basic pattern can be seen in women with potential obesity-related cancer, where the obesity group again shows a higher risk than the normal weighted group. The difference becomes more noticeable in the graphs for established and potential obesity-related cancer. In men, the line for obesity rises more sharply and stays above the line for normal weight, especially as age gets older. That tells us that men with obesity have a greater cancer risk over time compared with men of normal weight. The graph for women shows a similar pattern, and it honestly looks even more obvious. The risk increases the risk increases in both groups as they age, but it increases more in women with obesity. That makes the connection between obesity and cancer risk look especially strong. What these graphs really show is that the effects of obesity may build over time. The biological changes from obesity, like inflammation and insulin resistance, do not usually cause immediate damage overnight. These are long-term effects that happen gradually, so it makes sense that the gap in cancer risk becomes clearer as people get older. I also think that it is important that these graphs include both men and women because it shows that it is not something that affects only one group. The percentages may be different, but the general pattern is similar in both sexes. That makes the evidence stronger because it shows obesity is a broad cancer risk factor. This slide also connects really well with my previous slide. The last slide explained how the biological reasons why obesity can contribute to cancer, like chronic inflammation, hormone imbalance, and insulin resistance. This slide shows those ideal reflected in actual research data from a large population. So one slide explains the mechanism, and this slide shows the pattern. Another thing worth pointing out is the difference between potential obesity-related cancers and established obesity-related cancers. The gap is usually bigger when the established cancers are included. That suggests the relationship is stronger for cancers that already have a recognized connection to obesity. So the main takeaway is that obesity is associated with a higher risk of cancer in both men and women, and that difference becomes more noticeable with age. So this makes the connection between obesity and cancer feel more real because it's not just a theory, it is something that actual researchers can actually observe with data.
Okay, so I'm gonna be talking about how diet influences cancer development. So research has shown that what we eat plays a major role in either increasing or decreasing our risk of cancer. There is strong evidence that links dietary patterns to cancer in multiple organs of the body. For example, certain dietary exposures like alcohol consumption have been associated with cancers of the colon, rectum, esophagus, liver, and even the head and neck. Because what happens is that the consumption of alcohol is it's metabolized in the body and it produces a toxic compound called acetaldehyde that can damage the DNA and interfere with normal cellular function. So this highlights that diet is not just about nutrition or weight, but also about long-term disease risks. And at the same time, it's important to understand that diet can have the opposite effect as well. Some nutrients can actually reduce the likelihood of cancer formation. So overall, diet can act in two directions. It can either promote cancer development or help protect against it. One major example is red and processed meat. These foods have been strongly linked to colorectal cancer. This is partly because processing and high temperature cooking can produce compounds that can damage DNA. And another important factor will be salty and pickled foods, which have been associated with an increased risk of stomach cancer. These foods can irritate the stomach lining and contribute to chronic inflammation over time. So, repeated exposure to these dietary factors can increase the likelihood of cellular damage, which can eventually lead to cancer. On the other hand, many dietary components have protective effect against cancer. For example, coffee consumption has been shown to decrease the risk of liver cancer and some type of skin cancer. And this is likely due to its antioxidant properties, which help protect against oxidative damage. Fruits and vegetables are also strongly associated with reduced cancer risk, especially for oral and pharyngeal cancers. They provide vitamins, fiber that can support the immune system and can neutralize harmful substances. Whole grains, dairy products, milk, and calcium intake have been linked to lower risk of colorectal cancer. These foods help maintain like a healthy digestive system and regulate cell growth in the colon. These examples show that diet is not just a risk factor, but also a powerful tool for cancer prevention. This scatter plot graph summarizes the relationship between dietary exposure and different type of cancer. At the top of the graph, we see in red the factors that are associated with increased cancer risk. Alcohol appears multiple times across different cancers, showing how consistent and strong that association is. And on the lower part of the graph in green, we see protective factors such as fruits, vegetables, coffee, and dairy products, and these are linked to decreased cancer risk. The graph also shows the strength of evidence ranging from weak to strong, and this helps us understand which relationships are well supported by research and which ones are still need more evidence. But overall, this visual representation highlights how different dietary components can have opposite effects depending on what is consumed. Okay, to better understand these relationships, it's important to look at the biological mechanisms behind it. Diet influences cancer development through several key processes. First, we see that diet can cause genetic and epigenetic changes. This means that it can alter how genes are expressed or directly damage DNA, which can initiate cancer. Second, we see that diet affects inflammation, since some foods promote chronic inflammation, creating an environment that supports tumor growth. We also see that diet influences hormones and growth signals. For example, certain dietary patterns can increase estrogen levels, which is linked to breast cancer risk. We also see that nutrients regulate the cell cycle, including cell growth and apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. And cancer occurs when cells grow uncontrollably and fail to undergo apoptosis. So diet impacts the body's ability to repair DNA. A healthy diet can support repair mechanisms, while poor diet might allow mutations to accumulate over time.
Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about the impact of chronic stress on cancer. So when we think about things that affect cancer, we usually think about stuff like smoking, diet, or environmental exposures. But some people don't always think about is stress. Chronic stress can actually act like an environmental factor because it changes what's going on inside the body over time. Chronic stress basically means your body stays in constant fight or flight mode instead of calming down after a stressful situation. When that happens, your body keeps releasing hormones like cortisol, which can start affecting your health in different ways. Research shows that chronic stress can weaken the immune system, and that's important because your immune system helps find and destroy abnormal cells, including cancer cells. If your immune system isn't working as well, those cells can grow more easily. Stress also increases inflammation in the body. When inflammation sticks around for a long time, it can create conditions that actually help tumors grow. A study by Herbetko found that chronic stress is linked to things like tumor progression and even metastasis, which is when cancer spreads. Another important point is that stress can affect how patients respond to treatment. People dealing with higher stress levels may not respond as well and may even experience faster disease progression. So, the main idea is that stress affects the body physically and not just emotionally. It increases cortisol, weakens immune function, and increases inflammation. All of those things can make it easier for cancer to grow and spread. From my experience, I'm working as a medical scribe in radiation oncology. I specifically work with prostate cancer patients, and I actually see this a lot. Patients are always dealing with stress from so many things: the diagnosis, the treatment, the side effects, and just everything going on in their regular daily lives. Even though stress isn't the only factor, it's clear that it affects how patients go through treatment and recovery. So, overall, chronic stress can weaken the immune system, increase inflammation, support tumor growth, and affect treatment outcomes. Basically, managing stress isn't about just feeling better mentally, it can actually play a role in cancer care too.
So now I will be talking about cancer and its cancer risk. As I had mentioned earlier, smoking is a huge contributor to cancer, and studies have showed how around 8 million people die prematurely as a result of smoking, and that is only in the United States. It has been proven that people who smoke tobacco are intaking over 1,000 different chemicals and carcinogens, which are more specifically the tobacco-specific nitrosamines, the TSNAs, and those are the most potent carcinogens because they tend to have a little bit more of poisons. And so these are poisons that are just included in all cigarettes, and it is what the average American is consuming on a day-to-day basis. And another one is the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which is another huge contributor to lung cancer, more specifically. And there are roughly around 16 cancers linked to smoking. And the most common one that we all know of is lung cancer. However, there's other cancers that we are not 100% aware of, and those are the liver, stomach, esophagus, pancreas, and many other more, such as cervix and ovarian cancer, is also another cancer that can be induced due to smoking. And so, according to the Cancer Council, chemicals and tobacco will also affect people who are exposed to cigarette smoke. So, this implies that even if you're not the one smoking and you're just simply near it, you're also at a risk of having cancer and intaking whatever carcinogens that the person next to you is intaking. And so, research has established that there is no safe level of smoking with even low levels of smoking linked to increased cancer risk. Smoking cessation remains the most critical cancer and factor of reducing cancer deaths across America. Smoking can not only cause cancer, but also block your body from fighting it. Sorry. And so the reason for this is because there are several poisons in cigarette smoke that can weaken the body's immune system. And this makes it much more difficult for your body to fight it off and kill off any cancer cells in your body. Although smoking has all of these great risks, there's still time for one to quit and improve their lifestyle. According to the Cancer Council, it takes roughly around 6 hours for the body to repair itself and to reduce any risk of cancer or any disease in general to start growing and developing inside of your body. And as you can see here in the graph, it clearly shows a strong relationship as cigarette smoking increased in the first half, which is, as you can see here, the purple line over the 20th century, and lung cancer deaths rose several decades later. When smoking rates declined, lung cancer deaths also declined after the delay. So the mortality rate after the 1980s and 1990s began to decrease at around less than 100,000 deaths per man. And this is more specific in men. And so it is important to note how lung cancer deaths increase after smoking increased. And so it is more important to see that the rise in lung cancer deaths lags behind smoking rates because cancer developed over many years. And so, in conclusion, it has been proven that our lifestyle choices can potentially risk us to be exposed to different types of cancers. As mentioned earlier, the things that we put into our body do play a huge role. And so, certain foods, such as processed meats, are things that we eat on a day-to-day basis, and we fail to realize that processed meats are preserved using nitrates and nitrates, which can increase once to be exposed to cancers such as stomach and colorectal. Other contributors are red meat, alcohol, processed foods, and foods and drinks with a high amounts of added sugars. So these are things that the average American does consume daily, from going to McDonald's or making their coffee at home, or just overall having and eating things that are high in sugars. And we don't really realize that it does play a huge and detrimental role into our lives. And so that is why many physicians do recommend to have these items in moderation. So you're not, it's not that you have to stop consuming them, but you do have to have them in moderation. And also, they promote the idea of exercise. So managing your weight, regulating hormone levels, and reducing chronic inflammation has been proven to reduce cancer risk, and exercising roughly around 4 to 5 times a week and ensuring to incorporate weight is beyond important and beneficial, especially for women after the age of 50. And so, finally, learning how to manage stress is essential. Stress is something that anyone from the age of 12 to the age of 70 experiences, and it is something that plays a vital role in our lives. It is something that everyone from male to female do experience, and so it is beyond important to manage your stress. Chronic stress and long-term stress does put your health at risk and can severely do damage to your health. And it usually takes more than one homework for cancer to grow, but the concern is that the chronic stress can activate them at once. There are many approaches to reducing stress, such as therapy and other mental exercises that can be done either from home or in a facility. And these are exercises that can keep you calm and relaxed. Learning to incorporate those exercises in your day-to-day life can help reduce any inflammation caused by stress and lowers your chances of being exposed to cancer. These are our references.